cab driver was certainly silly. I told him I wanted to get to Dr. Nelson's place. I gave him $5, and I told him I was in a hurry. He said, oh, all right, I'll step on it. So I said, well, get me to the sanitarium first. Then you can step on it, sit on it, iron it out. I don't care what you do.
Well, they're just not making cab drivers like they used to.
Everyone thought they knew why Gracie Allen quit her hit TV show in 1958. They were wrong. Behind the scenes, she was fighting for her life, suffering heart attacks between takes, while George remained clueless. When the final episode aired, she didn't even say goodbye. She just disappeared. Today, we reveal what really happened that last night, and the devastating secret that tore Hollywood's perfect couple apart. Nathan Birnbaum was born on January 20th, 1896, in a small three-room apartment on New York's Lower East Side. He was the 9th of 12 children in a Jewish immigrant family. His father, Louis, worked as a butcher's helper and part-time cantor. His mother, Dora, took in laundry to make ends meet. Money was always tight, but when Louis died in 1904 during the influenza epidemic, things became even harder. Dora was left to raise 12 children on her own, doing whatever she could to keep them fed. The Lower East Side was a tough place to grow up. The streets were packed, the buildings were overcrowded, and almost everyone was struggling. But Burns never felt poor because no one around him had more than he did. His mother's sense of humor kept them going, and he inherited her wit. Laughter became his way of dealing with life, a skill that would one day make him famous. Burns and his brothers found ways to survive. They scavenged coal from delivery trucks to heat their home. Sometimes they sold it to neighbors for a little extra money. The locals started calling them the Burns Brothers. Years later, that name would inspire his stage persona. By the time he was 7, he had already figured out how to make people laugh and how to make a little money doing it. He formed a singing group with 3 neighborhood kids and called it the Pee Wee Quartet. They performed on street corners, ferry boats, and even in saloons. If they were lucky, people tossed them a few pennies. If they weren't, their hats were stolen before they could collect anything. Burns later joked, "Sometimes they threw something in the hats. Sometimes they took something out of the hats. Sometimes they took the hats." Their first real break came from a letter carrier named Lou Farley. He overheard them singing in a candy shop basement and encouraged them to perform in public. He even taught them how to harmonize. They weren't the best singers, but they had energy and charm, and people liked them. Their small earnings helped Burns's family, but more than that, they gave him something to dream about. School didn't interest him. By the time he was 8 or 9, he had dropped out. Making money seemed more important, and he was always looking for ways to do it. He delivered newspapers, ran errands, and worked in a candy shop basement making syrup. During breaks, he and his co-workers would sing for fun. People passing by started tossing them coins. That was when Burns realized something. Entertaining people could be a real job. His early work may not have been glamorous, but it taught him something important. He later said, "None of us ever let school get in the way of our education." His real education came from the streets. Every job, every performance, every person he met taught him something new. As he moved from street performances to vaudeville, he went through different stage names. Nathan Birnbaum didn't sound like a star, so he tried names like Willie Delight, Pedro Lopez, Billy Pierce, and Jimmy Malone. Eventually, he settled on George Burns. Some say he took George from an older brother he admired. Others believe Burns came from the coal company trucks he used to raid as a kid. Another theory is that he wanted a name that didn't sound too Jewish, making it easier to get hired. Whatever the reason, George Burns became more than just a name. It was the start of something bigger. In 1923, George Burns met Gracie Allen at a vaudeville theater in Union Hill, New Jersey. She was just 17, a talented singer and dancer from San Francisco, and had been performing with her sisters for years. Burns, born Nathan Birnbaum in 1896, had already spent much of his life on stage. He had tried singing, dancing, and comedy, but nothing had made him a star. After splitting from his previous partner, Billy Lorraine, he was looking for someone new to work with. Gracie wasn't searching for a partner. In fact, she was thinking about leaving show business altogether and going to secretarial school. Steady work wasn't easy to find, and she wasn't sure performing was the right path. But then she saw George on stage. Something about him made her curious. She agreed to give it a try, and their first performance together happened at the Hill Street Theater in Newark. George played the comedian, and Gracie played the straight woman. But something unexpected happened. The audience laughed at Gracie's lines more than George's jokes. At first, he thought they were laughing at the wrong moments. Then he realized they weren't. They were laughing because Gracie had something special. Her delivery was so natural, so effortlessly funny, that even her most serious-sounding lines turned into comedy. George understood what needed to happen. He changed the act completely. Instead of trying to be the funny one, he became the straight man. Gracie took center stage, and the audience loved her even more. Her comedy had a kind of magic to it. She could say something completely illogical and make it sound reasonable. If she lost $40 gambling, she'd say she actually won $10 because she expected to lose $50. It made no sense, yet it somehow did. People couldn't get enough of her. George didn't mind stepping back. He knew Gracie was the real star. Later, he joked that his job was easy. All he had to do was ask, "Gracie, how's your brother?" And she would talk for the next 38 years. But their chemistry wasn't just on stage. They spent so much time together that their partnership became something more. After 3 years of working side by side, they got married on January 27, 1926. At that point, they weren't famous yet, but their act was gaining attention. Their marriage wasn't just a personal milestone, it became part of their performances too. They played a married couple in their routines, and it felt natural because it was real. Audiences believed in them. They saw something genuine, something rare. Off stage, they built a life together. They adopted 2 children, Ronnie and Sandra, and despite their busy careers, they created a home filled with warmth and love. Then came their big break. In 1927, they signed with the Keith Albee Orpheum Vaudeville circuit, one of the biggest names in entertainment. This wasn't just another job. This was a chance to perform in front of the largest audiences in the country. It was the kind of opportunity that could change everything, and it did. The Keith circuit took them from small-town theaters to major cities. They became headliners, no longer just another comedy act, but one of vaudeville's best. The magic between them was undeniable. By 1931, they had reached the peak of the industry, performing at New York's Palace Theater alongside legends like Eddie Cantor and George Jessel. In 1929, George Burns and Gracie Allen stepped into a BBC radio studio in London. Their voices about to reach an audience unlike any they had performed for before. They had spent years perfecting their act in vaudeville theaters across America, but radio was something new. It was a different kind of stage, one without lights, costumes, or an audience reacting in real time. Their comedy had always relied on timing, and now, without the visual cues of live performance, everything came down to their voices. They were in England on tour, playing in theaters as part of their vaudeville circuit. The BBC had been growing rapidly since its founding in 1922, becoming one of the most powerful broadcasters in the world. For Burns and Allen, this was an opportunity to bring their act to a much larger audience. It was also a test. Would their humor, built for American crowds, work for British listeners? It did. Their routine followed the same formula that had made them popular on stage. George played the straight man, calm and logical. Gracie, with her unpredictable and delightful way of thinking, stole the show. Her humor seemed nonsensical at first, but the more she talked, the funnier it became. British audiences, just like American ones, fell in love with her. Radio was still in its early days, and this was a moment of change. Broadcasters were experimenting with new types of content, pushing the boundaries of what could be done without a visual element. Burns and Allen fit right into this evolution. Their appearance on BBC Radio proved that comedy could work just as well through sound alone. It also showed them that their act had a universal appeal. When they returned to the United States in 1930, they were ready to take the next step. They auditioned for NBC, hoping to land a spot on American radio. The network executives weren't impressed. They didn't think Burns and Allen's style would translate well to the airwaves. It was a crushing rejection. For a moment, it seemed like their dream of breaking into radio had ended before it even began. Then, something unexpected happened. Later that year, Gracie was invited to appear on Eddie Cantor's popular radio show. Cantor was one of the biggest stars in entertainment, known for his sharp comedic timing and eye for talent. Gracie stepped up to the microphone and, within minutes, had the audience laughing uncontrollably. Her performance was so strong that few even noticed George wasn't there. It was clear. Gracie wasn't just funny. She was a star. That one performance changed everything. Soon after, Burns and Allen were invited to perform together on the Fleischmann's Yeast Hour, hosted by Rudy Vallee. This was one of the most listened-to programs in the country. Their chemistry was undeniable, and the audience response was overwhelming. Just like that, the rejection from NBC didn't matter anymore. Burns and Allen had found their way into radio, not because a network believed in them, but because the audience did. By 1932, they had become regulars on The Guy Lombardo Show on CBS. Lombardo was already a major name in music, known for his orchestra's smooth, danceable style. Adding Burns and Allen to his show gave it a new dimension. Their comedy provided the perfect break between songs, keeping listeners entertained from start to finish. This was a crucial period for them. In vaudeville, they had relied on physical humor and audience reactions to bring their jokes to life. On radio, everything had to come through in their voices. They adjusted, fine-tuned their timing, and made sure every pause, every word, and every shift in tone worked to perfection. Their ability to adapt turned them into radio stars. Audiences loved them. The industry took notice, and soon they were given something even bigger. On September 19, 1934, Burns and Allen launched their own radio show, The Adventures of Gracie. This wasn't just another step forward. It was the moment they became headliners. The show would change titles over the years, but its core never changed. It was built around Gracie's brilliantly absurd logic and George's perfectly timed reactions. One of their most famous stunts had started even before their show officially began. In early 1933, Gracie had gone on the air claiming she was searching for her lost brother. It was a running gag that crossed from one program to another. She interrupted other broadcasts, appearing on different shows, asking hosts and guests if they had seen him. It was a stroke of comedic genius, not just because it was funny, but because it made listeners feel like they were part of the joke. As the years passed, the show evolved. In the beginning, it still carried a vaudeville feel, rapid-fire jokes, quick exchanges, and standalone routines. But by the early 1940s, Burns and Allen realized their audience was changing. People who had once packed vaudeville theaters were now older, and they were looking for something new. Instead of sticking to variety-style comedy, the show shifted into more of a sitcom format. Now, instead of just telling jokes, George and Gracie played a married couple dealing with everyday life. Of course, Gracie's version of everyday life was always delightfully offbeat. The change worked. The show stayed fresh, and its audience kept growing. Strong supporting characters helped shape its world. There was announcer Bill Goodwin, who brought his own charm to the show. Their fictional neighbors, Harry and Blanche Morton, added another layer to the comedy. But no matter how much the format changed, the heart of the show remained the same. Gracie's lovable, unpredictable personality and George's patient, straight-man delivery. For 17 years, the adventures of Gracie kept audiences laughing. It became one of the most beloved programs in radio history. Burns and Allen had started as vaudeville performers, unsure if their humor would work beyond the stage. By the time their show ended in 1950, they had become legends. On October 12, 1950, the George Burns and Gracie Allen Show premiered on CBS. By then, Burns and Allen were already famous. They had conquered vaudeville in the 1920s, then spent over 20 years as one of radio's biggest comedy acts. Moving to television seemed like the next step, but it wasn't easy. Many radio stars struggled to adapt. Some didn't have the right screen presence. Others relied too much on dialogue, forgetting that TV needed more than just words. Burns and Allen found a way to make it work. They kept their signature humor but shaped it for a visual audience. The show became an instant hit. It ran for 8 seasons, ending in 1958 with 291 episodes. At first, it aired live every other Thursday, but by the 3rd season, it became a weekly series. Audiences loved it, and CBS quickly recognized its value. In 1953, it joined I Love Lucy on Monday nights, making CBS the undisputed leader in primetime television. The premise was simple. George and Gracie played a fictionalized version of themselves, a married couple navigating everyday situations. Gracie's character was delightfully unpredictable, turning simple moments into chaos with her unique logic. George played the straight man, reacting with quiet amusement. But what made the show truly special was the way it broke the rules of traditional storytelling. Unlike most sitcoms, where characters stayed within their world, George spoke directly to the audience. He stepped out of scenes, commented on what was happening, and let viewers in on the joke. It was a technique that made the show feel fresh, giving audiences a sense of connection they didn't get anywhere else. When the show began, it was filmed live in New York's Mansfield Theater. After 6 episodes, the production moved to Hollywood. At the time, most television was still based in New York, but that was changing. CBS saw the future in California, and Burns and Allen became one of the first CBS shows to make the move. The shift gave them more control. Instead of performing live, they switched to pre-recorded episodes after the first 2 seasons. It was a smart decision. Filming made production smoother and allowed the show to be syndicated, extending its reach beyond its original broadcasts. Even after moving away from live performances, Burns was determined to keep the show's energy intact. Many sitcoms used canned laughter, adding artificial audience reactions to make jokes seem funnier. Burns didn't want that. Instead, he screened every episode for a test audience, recording their real laughter. If a joke didn't land, he adjusted the timing before the episode aired. He believed comedy should feel natural, and that belief shaped the show's lasting charm. One of Burns's biggest innovations was breaking the fourth wall. He didn't just act in scenes, he stepped outside them, talking directly to the audience. He got the idea from Our Town, a 1938 play where characters addressed viewers in a way that felt personal and direct. Burns had experimented with this style as early as 1929 in the short film Lamb Chops, but television gave him the perfect platform to refine it. Each episode began with George standing in what looked like his living room, a cigar in hand. He spoke to viewers, setting up the story with a dry, knowing humor. Throughout the episode, he paused scenes, stepping out of character to share his thoughts or highlight Gracie's latest bit of logic. It wasn't just a gimmick. It became part of the storytelling itself. It made the audience feel involved, as if they were in on something special. George Burns wasn't just the star of the George Burns and Gracie Allen show. He was the one shaping its comedy behind the scenes. He worked closely with Paul Henning, a writer who would later create The Beverly Hillbillies, Green Acres, and Petticoat Junction. Henning had a unique way of writing. He didn't just focus on jokes. He built humor around characters, letting their personalities drive the comedy. That was exactly what Burns and Allen needed. The show revolved around Gracie Allen's wonderfully illogical way of thinking. Instead of setting up punchlines, the comedy unfolded naturally as Gracie's ideas sent everyone around her into confusion. Henning had been with Burns and Allen since its radio days, but writing for television was different. On radio, everything was about dialogue. On TV, the audience could see the characters react, which made the comedy richer. George Burns understood this better than anyone. He didn't just act in the show. He worked on the scripts himself, shaping every detail. He would take his team to Palm Springs, where they would spend days coming up with new ideas. Some of the funniest moments in television came out of those sessions. The show felt personal, almost like watching George and Gracie's real life unfold. That wasn't just good acting. The set was designed to look exactly like their real home in Beverly Hills. Even the outside shots used in the show were of their actual house at 720 North Maple Drive. The home's style reflected who they were. It was elegant but inviting, sophisticated but warm. One painting in their library, Dooryard Elm by Robert Strong Woodward, had been in their home since 1937. It became part of the set, too, blurring the line between their real life and the world of the show. That mix of reality and fiction made the comedy even stronger. One running gag involved a closet overflowing with hats. Guests would visit, get caught in Gracie's tangled logic, and leave so quickly they forgot their hats. It was a simple joke, but it made the home feel real. It wasn't just a backdrop, it was part of the storytelling. The way the show was filmed was just as carefully planned. Instead of stretching production over several days, they filmed an entire episode in one. They used a 2-camera setup, which was rare at the time. After filming, they screened the episode for a live audience and recorded their laughter. That laughter was then mixed into the final broadcast. It wasn't like other shows that used artificial canned laughter. If a joke didn't get the right reaction, they reworked it or adjusted the timing. George Burns wanted everything to feel natural. Gracie Allen had been thinking about retirement long before her television show even began. By the time the George Burns and Gracie Allen show premiered in 1950, she had already spent most of her life performing. She started as a child in vaudeville, moved on to radio, then film, and for years she and her husband, George Burns, had been one of the most beloved comedy duos in entertainment. George was passionate about their work, but Gracie often dreamed of a quieter life. When they made the jump from radio to television, she hesitated. The new format demanded more energy, longer hours, and constant memorization. Still, she agreed to do it, not because she wanted to, but because she knew how much it meant to George. As the years went on, she struggled more and more with the demands of the show. Memorizing lines became especially difficult. Her comedy relied on illogical dialogue, so she had to deliver every word exactly as written. A slight change could ruin the timing or alter the joke. Unlike George, who had a more natural style, she couldn't improvise. Every line had to be precise, and it was exhausting. George later admitted that her role was far harder than his, calling her lines the toughest in the world to do. But the long hours weren't the only thing wearing her down. Throughout the 1950s, Gracie dealt with serious health problems. She suffered from migraines all her life, but she never let them interfere with her work. Even after breaking her nose in an accident, she still performed 3 shows in the days that followed. Her resilience was remarkable, but her heart condition was something she couldn't ignore. She had mild heart attacks and recurring chest pains, but she kept going, pushing through for the sake of the show. George later admitted he hadn't realized how much she was struggling. By the late 1950s, she couldn't do it anymore. The exhaustion, the stress, and the toll on her health made the decision clear. On February 17, 1958, she officially announced her retirement. CBS wanted to continue the show since it was still one of the most popular on television, but Gracie wouldn't change her mind. She was ready to step away. Filming wrapped on June 4th, and the final episode aired on September 22nd. There was no special goodbye, no emotional farewell, just another episode like any other. At the wrap party, Gracie took a sip of champagne, thanked everyone, and quietly left. It was the perfect exit for someone who had never needed grand gestures or attention outside of her performances. After retiring, she finally had the peaceful life she had always wanted. She spent her days gardening, taking care of her home, and enjoying her time away from the spotlight. Though she made occasional public appearances with George, she never returned to performing. When Gracie Allen retired in 1958, George Burns wasn't ready to leave the stage. He had spent decades performing alongside her, and the idea of stopping wasn't something he could accept. So he tried to keep going with the George Burns Show, hoping audiences would still tune in. Most of the cast remained, including Bea Benaderet and Harry Von Zell, but something was missing. It wasn't just Gracie's presence. It was the magic she brought to every scene. Burns later admitted the show had everything it needed except the one thing it couldn't have: Gracie. No matter how hard he tried to adjust, the audience felt the absence just as much as he did. The show lasted only 1 season before it was quietly canceled. Gracie's health had been fragile for years, and on August 27, 1964, she passed away from a heart attack. She had been at Cedars of Lebanon Hospital in Los Angeles, where doctors had done everything they could. She was 69. Even with her heart problems, she had remained active, showing up at family events and attending actress Edie Adams's wedding just days before her death. Burns had known this moment would come, but that didn't make it easier. At Forest Lawn Memorial Park, where she was laid to rest, her crypt was engraved with 2 simple words: "Together again." It was a promise that even in death, she and George wouldn't be apart. They had always been different in faith. She was Catholic, and he was Jewish. But they had found a way to be together in life, and made sure nothing would change that afterward. After Gracie was gone, Burns felt lost. He visited her grave every day. He carried her wedding ring on a chain in his pocket. He once said she wasn't just his wife, she was his next breath. Without her, everything felt empty. For a while, he didn't know what to do. Then, slowly, he turned back to the only thing that had ever made sense to him: performing. He stepped back onto the stage, this time as a solo act. His comedy changed. Without Gracie, He couldn't rely on their old routines, so he found a new voice. His act became more personal, more relaxed. Instead of playing the straight man, he leaned into his own charm, speaking directly to audiences in a way he never had before. People loved it. He wasn't just surviving. He was reinventing himself. Then, at 79 years old, something unexpected happened. He was offered a role in The Sunshine Boys, a film about two aging vaudevillians. The part had originally been meant for his best friend, Jack Benny, but when Benny became too ill to take it, Burns stepped in. He had spent a lifetime in comedy, but this was different. This was a chance to show the world he wasn't just a performer from the past. He was still as sharp as ever. When the film was released, critics and audiences agreed. Burns was brilliant. He won an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, making him one of the oldest winners in history. And just like that, his career took off again. The success of The Sunshine Boys led to more roles, including the lead in Oh, God, a film that introduced him to a whole new generation. He had already conquered vaudeville, radio, television, and film. But now, in his later years, he was proving that some stars never fade.